The first time I realized my family was planning to erase me, it wasn't during a fight or a dramatic confession. It was a Tuesday afternoon, in a glass-walled conference room, when my mother slid a folder across the table and didn't say my name. If this kind of story hits close to home, pause for a second. Like the video, subscribe if you want the rest, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. You don't have to explain anything, just let me know you're here. Then, stay with me. My name is Rachel Monroe. I was 31 years old when my parents decided I was no longer part of their future. At the time, I was the director of operations at a mid-sized logistics firm in Columbus, Ohio. 92 employees, annual revenue just under $40 million. I handled contracts, vendor negotiations, and compliance. I signed off on six-figure decisions before lunch and still packed my own leftovers for dinner. I wasn't loud about my life. I didn't need to be. The meeting took place in my parents' house. Not my childhood home, but the newer one. 4 bedrooms, white stone exterior. The kind of place people call a forever home, like permanence is something you can buy. My father, Thomas Monroe, sat at the head of the table. He always did, even when it wasn't his table, even when it wasn't his meeting. My mother, Evelyn Monroe, sat beside him with her hands folded around a leather planner she never actually used. She preferred memory, or at least the version of memory that suited her. Across from me sat my younger sister, Lauren Monroe, 27, recently engaged, recently promoted at my father's company, recently very comfortable not looking me in the eye. The folder was thick, cream-colored, my last name typed neatly on the tab. Rachel, my father said, clearing his throat. This is just a formality. That word, formality. Families use it the way corporations use restructuring. He pushed the folder closer. I opened it. Inside was a draft of my grandmother's revised estate plan. Margaret Monroe, my dad's mother, the woman who taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 10 and slipped me a $100 bill every time I visited, whispering, "Don't tell your father." She'd had a stroke 3 months earlier. Mild, they said. Temporary confusion, they said. She was 91, and suddenly everything about her life needed simplifying. I scanned the pages. Trust allocations, real estate holdings, investment accounts. My name appeared once, not as a beneficiary, as an executor's alternate. Secondary, conditional. Lauren's name was everywhere. Primary heir, trustee, decision maker. I looked up. This has to be a mistake. My mother smiled softly, the practiced one. The smile that suggested concern, not guilt. Your grandmother wanted things to be simple, sweetheart. Simple for who? My father leaned back in his chair. You're doing well on your own, Rachel. You don't need this. There it was. Not, you don't deserve this. Not, we forgot you. You don't need this. That sentence carried 31 years of subtext. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't ask, the one who moved out at 18, paid her own tuition, never came home with drama or debt. Lauren needed support. Lauren needed guidance. Lauren needed help. I needed nothing. So I got nothing. Lauren finally spoke. It's not personal. Grandma just feels closer to me. She said it like it was weather, like proximity was fate. I closed the folder slowly. My hands were steady. I noticed that first. How long has this been in the works? I asked. My father didn't answer immediately. He glanced at my mother. She nodded once. Since Christmas, he said. Christmas. We'd all been there. Same table, same tree. I'd brought wine. Lauren had announced her engagement. Grandma had hugged me and told me she was proud of me. And somewhere between dessert and coffee, they'd decided my life was complete enough to be excluded. I stood up. I'd like to speak to Grandma. Evelyn's smile tightened. She's resting. Always resting. Always unavailable when things needed clarity. Then I'll wait, I said. Thomas stood too. His chair scraped the floor. Rachel, don't make this difficult. That was the moment something shifted. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Orientation. I realized I wasn't in a family discussion. I was in a business meeting where the outcome had already been decided, and my presence was a courtesy. I picked up my coat. Send me the final copy. Lauren frowned. "You're not going to sign anything?" "There's nothing for me to sign," I said. Driving home, I replayed the afternoon in pieces. The way my name looked small on the page. The way Lauren's ring caught the light. The way my father never once asked how I felt. At a red light on Broad Street, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Please don't overreact. You know how sensitive your grandmother is right now." Overreact. I laughed once, out loud, alone in my car. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up documents I hadn't looked at in years. Emails, contracts, old notes, things I'd kept because that's what I do. I keep records. What my family didn't know was that for the last 8 years, I've been quietly advising my father's company. Not officially, not on paper. Vendor introductions, risk assessments, cost-saving strategies. I'd never invoiced, never asked for equity. I was just helping, because that's what daughters like me do. What they also didn't know was that 6 months earlier, I'd accepted an offer from a private equity firm. Senior operations consultant. Start date in 3 weeks. I hadn't told them yet. There never seemed to be a right time. I poured a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. This wasn't about money. Not yet. It was about erasure. And as I stared at the quiet reflection of my own face in the dark window, one thought settled in, calm and precise. If they were rewriting the family story without me, I was free to write my own version. They just didn't know yet how expensive that edit was going to be. And the thing about edits is this: once they're public, you can't undo them. I didn't confront anyone the next morning. I didn't call my grandmother. I didn't text Lauren. I went to work. That choice mattered more than I realized at the time. Wednesday mornings at Atlantic Freight Solutions always started the same way. Coffee burnt from sitting too long on the warmer. A status meeting at 9 a.m. sharp. 10 people around a table, pretending their week wasn't already off the rails. I walked in at 8:47, set my bag down, opened my laptop, and reviewed a contract amendment from a regional carrier in Indiana. 6 figures, tight margins. A clause most people would miss. I didn't miss it. At 9:03, my boss, Michael Reeves, leaned back in his chair and said, "Rachel, can you take this one?" I did. Calm, precise, no edge in my voice. I pointed out the exposure, suggested a counter, and backed it with numbers. Michael nodded. "That's why we pay you." I almost smiled. By noon, I'd finalized 3 negotiations, answered 14 emails, and approved a vendor termination that saved us $220,000 annually. My family thought I was expendable because I was quiet. They had no idea how much weight quiet could carry. At 1:17 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Lauren, can we talk?" I let it sit, finished my salad, replied 15 minutes later. "About what?" She called instead of answering. "Rachel, you're being weird," she said without preamble. "Mom's upset." I leaned back in my chair, stared at the ceiling tiles. "That's not new." "This isn't fair," she said. "You're acting like we stabbed you." "You excluded me from Grandma's will," I said. "That's not a misunderstanding." A pause. I could hear traffic on her end. She was probably in her car, parked outside my father's office, killing time before heading in. "It's not like you were counting on it," she said carefully. There it was again. "You don't need this." "I wasn't," I said. "But I was counting on honesty." She exhaled sharply. "Look, Dad says you're overthinking this. He thinks you've always wanted distance anyway." That sentence landed harder than anything else, because it was close enough to the truth to be dangerous. I had wanted distance. From the control, the constant assessment, the way love in our family was measured by dependence. But distance isn't absence. "You don't get to rewrite my motives," I said. "Not anymore." She went quiet, then softer. "You're coming to the engagement dinner on Sunday, right?" Engagement dinner. Another event, another table, another seating arrangement I already knew would place me at the edge. "I haven't decided," I said. "Rachel, don't do this." I almost laughed again. Almost. "Lauren," I said, "you didn't consult me when you decided I didn't belong. Don't ask me to perform now." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I went through my files. Not emotional files, financial ones. 8 years earlier, when my father, Thomas Monroe, decided to expand Monroe Industrial Supply, he'd come to me late one night with spreadsheets and coffee-stained notebooks. "You're good with this stuff," he'd said. Just sanity check it. I'd done more than that. I'd built the cost model, flagged the risks, suggested alternative financing, connected him with a logistics partner that reduced shipping overhead by 18%. I'd never been added to payroll, never listed as a consultant, never acknowledged beyond "Rachel helped." At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. I was wrong. I opened my email archive and searched my father's name. Hundreds of messages, attachments, suggestions, revised drafts with my comments baked in. Proof of contribution isn't loud. It's cumulative. By Thursday afternoon, I'd compiled a folder labeled Monroe Advisory Work. Not for revenge, for clarity. That same afternoon, Michael Reeves asked me to step into his office. He closed the door, motioned for me to sit. "You doing okay?" he asked. I blinked. "Why?" He hesitated. "Your father called HR." The room went very still. "He asked whether you were distracted," Michael continued. "Said there were family issues that might affect your performance." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. "What did you say?" I asked. "That your performance has been exceptional," Michael said, "and that your family's opinions are not relevant to your employment." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Michael studied me. "I want to be clear. If anything escalates, you come to me." Escalates. My father had made his first move. He hadn't gone to me. He'd gone around me. The pattern was familiar. When control slipped, he looked for leverage. That night, I called my grandmother. Margaret Monroe answered on the third ring. "Rachel," she said, surprised but pleased. "It's good to hear your voice. How are you feeling?" I asked. "Slower," she said. But my mind's still mine. I closed my eyes. "Grandma," I said gently, "did you make changes to your will recently?" A pause. Longer this time. "Well," she said, "your father brought some papers. Said it would make things easier." "Did you read them?" I asked. "I trust your father," she said simply. That trust. Generational. Unquestioned. "Did anyone explain what changed?" I asked. Another pause. "They said Lauren needs stability," she said. "You're so capable, dear." I swallowed. "Grandma," I said, "did anyone ask what you wanted?" Silence. Not confusion. Realization. "Oh," she said quietly. "I didn't push. I didn't accuse. I just said, I love you." When we hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From containment. Because now, I knew. This wasn't just favoritism. It was manipulation. And it was already spreading. Friday morning, I accepted the private equity offer formally. Signed the contract. Start date moved up by 2 weeks at their request. Friday afternoon, I met with an attorney. Her name was Dana Whitaker, 45. Estate litigation. Sharp eyes. Minimal patience for family drama dressed up as concern. She reviewed my folder silently. After 20 minutes, she looked up. "Your family is treating you like a non-entity." "Yes," I said. "And you've been propping up their business without compensation," she said. "Yes. And now they're moving assets without informed consent from an elderly woman," she said. I nodded. Dana leaned back. "This isn't about hurt feelings. This is about control, money, and narrative." "Exactly. What do you want?" she asked. I thought about the engagement dinner, the will, the HR call. "I want the truth documented," I said. "And I want to stop being used." Dana smiled faintly. "Those goals are compatible." As I left her office, my phone buzzed again. A group text. "Family engagement dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m. Don't be late." I stared at the screen. They still expected me to show up, to sit quietly, to smile. I typed one sentence, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Instead, I turned my phone face down and kept walking. Sunday was coming. And this time, I wasn't walking in empty-handed. Sunday arrived with the kind of bright, indifferent sunshine that makes everything feel exposed. I parked 3 houses down from my parents' place, the white stone one with the manicured hedges and the wreath still hanging on the front door, even though it wasn't a holiday. I sat in my car for a full minute with the engine off, listening to the ticking sound as it cooled. I wasn't nervous. That surprised me. I was alert. There's a difference. I walked up the driveway at exactly 5:58 p.m. On time, but not early. I rang the bell instead of letting myself in like I used to. My mother, Evelyn Monroe, opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rachel," she said, pulling me into a brief hug. "I'm so glad you came. Behind her, the house hummed with voices and clinking glasses. The engagement dinner had already found its rhythm without me. I said I might, I replied, stepping inside. The dining room looked like a catalog spread. White linens, candles placed at careful intervals, place cards in calligraphy. My name was at the far end of the table, between an empty chair and the wall. Lauren's seat, of course, was beside my grandmother, Margaret Monroe. Her fiancé, Daniel Foster, sat on her other side, one arm draped casually over the back of her chair like he'd always belonged there. Daniel stood when he saw me. Rachel, right? I'm Daniel. Rachel, I confirmed, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, confident. He smiled easily. He seemed decent, which made this worse, not better. Dinner's almost ready, Lauren said brightly. She didn't look at me long enough for me to read her expression. My father, Thomas Monroe, raised his glass from the head of the table. Everyone, let's sit. I took my seat. The wall was close enough that my elbow brushed it if I moved too far to the right. A small thing. Intentional. Dinner unfolded in courses. Salad, roast chicken, stories. Thomas talked about the company, about expansion plans, about Lauren's promotion. He said her title out loud, Senior Development Manager. No one mentioned that 2 months earlier, she'd been an assistant. No one mentioned who'd designed the expansion model she was now overseeing. Margaret reached for my hand once. Her grip was warm, familiar. You look tired, she whispered. I'm not, I said, just paying attention. Halfway through the main course, Thomas stood again. If I could have everyone's attention, he said, tapping his glass. This was it. I just want to say how proud I am of Lauren, he continued. She's stepping into her future with grace and commitment. This marriage, this role in the family business, it's all part of something bigger. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Lauren blushed. Daniel squeezed her shoulder. And, Thomas said, his gaze sweeping the table, it's important to recognize when family members contribute in different ways. I felt the shift before the words landed. Some of us build families, he said. Some of us build careers. All of it has value. That old trick, praise that diminishes. I set my fork down. Thomas raised his glass toward me. Rachel's always been independent. We admire that. Admire. From a distance, the silence stretched. Everyone waited for me to smile, to nod, to accept my assigned role. I didn't. Can I say something? I asked. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Thomas hesitated. Of course, I stood. I looked at my grandmother first, then at Lauren, then at Daniel, who had no idea he'd married into a battlefield. I just want to clarify something, I said. Independence doesn't mean absence. It doesn't mean consent to be excluded. Evelyn's smile froze. This week, I continued. I learned that decisions were made about family assets without full understanding from the person who owns them. Margaret's fingers tightened around her napkin. Thomas's jaw set. Rachel, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single document. Not the whole folder, just one page. I had a conversation with Grandma on Thursday, I said. She wasn't aware that I'd been removed as a beneficiary. The table erupted in overlapping voices. What? Lauren said. That's not what happened, Evelyn said quickly. Margaret looked up at my father. Thomas? He didn't meet her eyes. I trusted you, she said quietly. That sentence carried more weight than any accusation. Thomas cleared his throat. Mother, we discussed simplifying things. You discussed, she said. I listened. I placed the document on the table in front of her. This is the revision, I said. And this is what changed. She adjusted her glasses and read. The room held its breath. When she finished, she folded the paper slowly. This isn't what I intended. Lauren stood abruptly. Grandma, you're upset. Let's talk about this later. No, Margaret said. Her voice was thin but steady. We'll talk now. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Lauren, maybe. This doesn't concern you, Lauren snapped, then caught herself. I sat back down. I'd said what needed saying. Thomas pushed his chair back. Rachel, you've made your point. No, I said. I've started it. I turned to my grandmother. I've scheduled an appointment with an estate attorney, Dana Whitaker. She specializes in elder representation. She'll explain everything clearly. Margaret nodded once. Good, Evelyn's face drained of color. Thomas leaned toward me, his voice low. "You're embarrassing this family." I met his gaze. "You embarrassed yourselves." Silence. Then Margaret spoke again. "Dinner is over," no one argued. As people stood and gathered their coats, Lauren pulled me aside. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "You're blowing everything up." I looked at her. Really looked. "You were comfortable when I was invisible," I said. "You're uncomfortable now that I'm not." She opened her mouth, closed it. Daniel approached, awkward. "Rachel, I didn't know about any of this." "I know," I said. "That's part of the problem." I left without dessert. In my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "You've crossed a line. Don't expect this to go well for you." I didn't reply, because lines work both ways. And the next one was about to be drawn in public. The fallout didn't wait for morning. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone had already filled with messages I didn't read. I knew who they were from without opening them. Evelyn's careful concern, Lauren's sharp panic, Thomas's clipped authority. I left the phone face down on the counter and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady again. That mattered. Sleep came in fragments, not because I was replaying dinner, but because my mind was moving ahead, laying out contingencies the way it always did. I woke before my alarm, showered, dressed, and went to work like it was any other Monday. At 9:12 a.m., Michael Reeves forwarded me an email. From Thomas Monroe. Subject: Urgent concern regarding Rachel Monroe. No greeting, no context. I closed my office door before opening it. Thomas wrote that he was worried about my emotional stability following recent family conflict. He suggested that I might benefit from time away, and implied that my judgment at work could be compromised. He framed it as concern. He always did. I stared at the screen, then forwarded the email to Dana Whitaker with one line: "He's escalating." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Good. That makes this easier." At 11 a.m., I met with Dana in her office. She'd already printed the email and highlighted 3 sections. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is an attempt to control the narrative." I nodded. "And this," she continued, "is the start of something more aggressive. He's laying groundwork." "For what?" I asked. Dana folded her hands. "To discredit you. Possibly to isolate you. Possibly to pressure your grandmother." I thought of Margaret's voice at the table, thin but steady. "He won't succeed," I said. Dana studied me. "I agree. But we need to move before he reframes this." She slid a folder across the desk. My name was on the tab. "First," she said, "we file a request for an independent review of your grandmother's estate changes. Not a challenge, a clarification. And second," she met my eyes, "we document your contributions to Monroe Industrial Supply." I exhaled slowly. "That's not going to go unnoticed." "No," Dana said. "It's going to go on record." By Wednesday, my father made his second move. He called Margaret's primary care physician. I didn't find out directly. Margaret told me herself when I visited her apartment that afternoon. "He asked whether I was confused," she said, sitting in her armchair, hands folded in her lap. "Whether I remembered signing the papers." "And?" I asked. "I told him I remembered trusting him," she said. "Not the same thing." Her eyes were clear, sharper than I'd seen them in years. "Rachel," she said quietly, "I don't like being managed." I smiled then, not outwardly, internally. A shift I felt in my bones. "He forgets," she continued, "that I raised him before he learned how to control a room." That night, Dana filed the request with the probate court. Thursday morning, Thomas called me directly. I answered. "You're pushing this too far," he said, without preamble. "Good morning to you too," I replied. "You think you're smarter than this process," he said. "You think because you have a career, you can upend a family." "I think," I said, "that you don't like losing control." Silence. "You're making your sister look bad," he said finally. That was the tell. Not the business, not the estate. Lauren made her own choices," I said. "So did you." "You've always resented her," he snapped. I laughed once. "No, I resented being erased." "You don't understand how families work," he said. "I understand exactly how ours does," I replied. "And I'm done participating in it the old way." He hung up. Friday afternoon, Dana called. "We have a date," she said. "Probate hearing. 2 weeks. And Monroe Industrial? I asked. She paused. Your father is not going to like what comes next. By the following Monday, Lauren showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and didn't invite her in. She stood there, arms crossed, eyes rimmed red. You blindsided me, she said. I leaned against the door frame. You were fine when I was excluded, quietly. This was supposed to be simple, she said. Grandma signs, we move on. For you, I said. She hesitated. Dad says you're doing this out of spite. I tilted my head. Do you believe that? She didn't answer. Instead, she said, Daniel's parents asked questions. There it was. Public discomfort. I'm not trying to ruin your life, I said. I'm trying to stop you from building it on something stolen. Her face tightened. You think everything is stolen. No, I said. Just what I helped build, without credit. She looked at me then. Really looked. You kept track, she said. I always do. She left without another word. 2 days later, Monroe Industrial Supply received a letter, not from me, from Dana, requesting documentation of advisory contributions provided by Rachel Monroe between 2016 and 2024. Thomas called me within the hour. You're threatening my company, he said. No, I replied. I'm clarifying my role. You never asked for anything, he said. I asked by doing the work, I said. You just never paid attention. He exhaled sharply. This will get ugly. I looked out my window at the quiet street, the ordinary afternoon light. It already did, I said. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder again. Emails, attachments, drafts with my comments. 8 years of quiet labor. 8 years of believing proximity equaled protection. I organized everything chronologically, labeled each section, cross-referenced outcomes. By midnight, it was clean. The next morning, my private equity firm called to move my start date up again. We need you sooner, the partner said. There's a restructuring coming. I smiled. Understood, I said. When I hung up, my phone buzzed with a final message from my father. If you proceed, you're no longer welcome in this family. I typed one response. I stopped trying to belong the moment you decided I didn't. I set the phone down. 2 weeks. That was all it would take for the story they'd been telling to start unraveling. And this time, it wouldn't be behind closed doors. The week before the hearing moved differently, like time had learned to hold its breath. I started my new role on a Monday. The office was on the 12th floor of a renovated building downtown. All glass and quiet efficiency. No family photos on desks, no legacy talk, just work. My title was Senior Operations Consultant. The scope was national. The compensation was more than my father had ever guessed I made. Not that the number mattered now. What mattered was that for the first time, no one there knew me as someone's daughter or someone's sister. They knew me as the person who fixed problems. On Wednesday afternoon, Dana called. Your father's attorney requested a continuance, she said. I closed my office door. On what grounds? Emotional distress, she replied. Claims the family needs time to heal. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. And the judge? I asked. Denied, Dana said. The court doesn't pause clarity for comfort. That sentence stayed with me. Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Rachel, a woman, said cautiously when I answered. This is Karen Ellis. I work in HR at Monroe Industrial Supply. I said nothing. I wanted to inform you, she continued, that your advisory role has come up in an internal review. Internal review. Corporate language for panic. There are questions, she said, about scope and compensation. I'm aware, I said. She hesitated. Would you be willing to meet? I looked at the city lights through the window. Yes, I said, with counsel present. She exhaled audibly. Understood. After the call, I sat still for a long moment. This was the part people don't talk about. The stretch between injustice and resolution, where nothing explodes, yet everything shifts. Where power doesn't scream, it slides. Friday night, my mother left a voicemail. Her voice was softer than usual, controlled, measured. Rachel, sweetheart, Evelyn said, your father is under a lot of stress. This doesn't have to be a battle. Families survive by letting things go. Letting things go. Translation? Letting me go. I didn't delete the message. I archived it. Saturday morning, I met Margaret for breakfast. She wore a pale blue sweater and lipstick she'd clearly applied with intention. Her walker stood unused by the table. "You look formidable," I said. She smiled. "So do you." Over eggs and toast, she told me something she hadn't said before. "When you were little," she said, "your father used to complain that you didn't need him." I looked up. "He said it like it was a flaw," she continued. "I told him independence isn't rejection." He didn't listen. I stirred my coffee. He still doesn't. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know this. I see what you've built." That mattered more than the will. Sunday came quietly. No engagement dinner this time. No invitations. Just silence. Lauren posted photos online, smiling, champagne, comments full of congratulations. I scrolled once, then closed the app. Monday morning, Dana and I walked into the probate courthouse together. The room was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled, neutral. No drama built into the architecture. Thomas Monroe sat at the table with his attorney. He looked older, not frail, just worn. Evelyn sat behind him, hands folded, eyes forward. Lauren wasn't there. Margaret sat beside me. The judge, Honorable Patricia Klein, wasted no time. "We're here to clarify intent," she said. "Nothing more." Dana presented the timeline, the revisions, the lack of independent counsel. Thomas's attorney spoke about family trust and deficiency. Then Judge Klein turned to my grandmother. "Mrs. Monroe," she said gently, "can you tell the court what you intended when you signed the revised documents?" Margaret sat straighter. "I intended to make things easier," she said. "Not unfair." She looked at Thomas. "And I did not intend to exclude my granddaughter." The judge nodded. "Thank you." That was it. No theatrics. No raised voices. Just correction. Judge Klein ordered the revisions voided, pending a new review with independent representation. When the gavel came down, Thomas didn't look at me. He stared at the table. Outside the courtroom, Evelyn approached. "This didn't have to happen," she said. "It already had," I replied. She searched my face. "What do you want from us?" I considered the question carefully. "I want distance," I said, "and honesty." She nodded slowly, as if filing the answer away for later use. That afternoon, Monroe Industrial Supply agreed to mediation. Karen Ellis sat across from me in a neutral conference room. Dana beside me, Thomas at the far end of the table. The numbers spoke louder than anyone. 8 years of advisory work. Quantified impact. Savings. Growth. When it was over, the agreement was clean. A retroactive consulting fee. Paid. No equity. No ongoing involvement. A line drawn and signed. As we stood to leave, Thomas finally spoke. "You could have asked," he said. I met his eyes. I asked every time I showed up. He had no answer for that. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph. Relief. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who didn't demand space until there was none left, pause here. Like the story if it resonates. Subscribe if you want to know how this ends. And if you've ever been told you didn't need what was taken from you, leave a comment. I see you. Because what came next wasn't reconciliation. It was consequence. And it arrived right on schedule. Consequences don't announce themselves. They show up in calendars, in canceled calls, in rooms that go quiet when your name is mentioned. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing a supply chain audit when my assistant, Nora Klein, knocked lightly on my office door. She didn't usually interrupt. "There's a call holding for you," she said. "Monroe Industrial Supply." I didn't look up. Put it through. It wasn't my father. It was the bank, a regional lender I recognized. The one that had financed Monroe Industrial's last expansion. "Ms. Monroe," the man said, polite but precise. "We're conducting a routine risk review." Routine. Nothing is routine when banks start calling daughters instead of CEOs. He didn't ask questions directly. He referenced documents, consulting agreements, advisory fees recently disclosed. "We weren't aware of external strategic involvement," he said. "This changes the risk profile." I pictured my father's face when he realized the people he'd relied on for leverage were now relying on paper. "I understand," I said. "All disclosures are now complete." The call ended. I sat back, and let that sink in. My father had built his authority on the assumption that no one would ever connect the dots. They were connecting them now. By Thursday, Dana called again. "Your father's attorney reached out," she said, informally. I closed my laptop. "About what?" "He's asking whether you'd consider a settlement that includes a confidentiality clause." I smiled. "No," I said. "We're already settled." Dana paused. That's what I told him. Friday afternoon, I received a message from Daniel Foster, Lauren's fiancé, soon-to-be husband. "Rachel, I hope this isn't inappropriate. I think we should talk." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Okay." We met at a coffee shop near the river. Neutral ground. Daniel arrived early. He stood when I walked in, the way people do when they're nervous. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. I sat. "You wanted to talk." He nodded. "I didn't know about any of this. The will, the company, your role." "I know," I said. He hesitated. "Lauren didn't tell me. That doesn't surprise me." He looked down at his hands. "My parents asked questions about the business, about finances." "And?" I asked. "They're concerned," he admitted. "They don't like instability." I stirred my coffee. "Neither do banks." He winced. "That's what I'm afraid of." There it was. Not loyalty. Logistics. "I'm not here to interfere with your marriage," I said. "But you should understand what you're stepping into." He met my eyes. "Do you think she knows how bad this is?" I thought of Lauren at the dinner table, the way she'd smiled while the ground shifted. "She knows what benefits her," I said. He nodded slowly. When we parted, he looked lighter. Or maybe heavier. Hard to tell. That evening, my phone rang. "Lauren." I almost didn't answer. Almost. "What did you say to Daniel?" she demanded. "I told him the truth," I said. "You're sabotaging my life," she said. "No," I replied. I stopped protecting a lie. She laughed sharply. "You always think you're right." "I think I'm done," I said. She went quiet. "You don't get to punish me for Dad's mistakes," she said finally. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm choosing myself." She hung up. Saturday morning, Margaret called. "Your father hasn't visited," she said. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," she sighed. "He doesn't like rooms where he isn't in charge." Neither did I, once. I'd just learned how to leave them. Monday, Monroe Industrial announced a restructuring. Not publicly. Internal. 2 departments merged. 1 senior role eliminated. Lauren's. She called me that night, crying. "They moved me," she said. No explanation. I listened, not because I owed her comfort, because I understood the sound of the ground giving way. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. I chose my words carefully. "You can start by being honest," I said. "With yourself." She didn't respond. I ended the call gently. That night, I sat in my apartment and realized something quietly profound. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires engagement. I was disengaging, and that was the real shift. The next morning, an email arrived from the private equity firm. Subject: board meeting invitation. They wanted me present for a strategic review. Executive level. I smiled. Somewhere across town, my father was losing leverage, losing the room. And the thing about rooms is this: once you learn how to walk out of the wrong ones, you start getting invited into better ones. The boardroom overlooked the river. Floor-to-ceiling glass, long table, no portraits of founders staring down from the walls. Power without nostalgia. I arrived 10 minutes early, not to impress anyone, but because I always did. Habit. Discipline. The kind my family never noticed because it didn't ask for applause. There were 8 people in the room when I walked in. 2 partners, 3 senior analysts, a general counsel, a woman I recognized from a conference panel 2 years ago, Melissa Grant, head of portfolio strategy. She nodded once when she saw me. Recognition without ceremony. "Rachel," one of the partners said, standing. "Glad you could make it." We shook hands. Sat. They didn't ask about my family. They didn't reference Monroe Industrial. They went straight to the work. Numbers on screens. Supply chain vulnerabilities. A Midwest manufacturing firm with inflated logistics costs and a leadership team resistant to outside input. "Sound familiar?" one analyst asked lightly. I didn't smile. I just spoke. For 40 minutes, I did what I do best. I mapped risk. I identified inefficiencies. I explained where ego was costing money and how silence had allowed it. No one interrupted. When I finished, Melissa leaned back in her chair. You don't flinch, she said. I prepare, I replied. The partner nodded. We want you leading this restructuring. Leading. Not advising. Not supporting. Owning. I accepted without hesitation. By the time I left the building, my phone had 3 missed calls, all from my mother. I didn't return them. The next escalation came from an unexpected direction. Church. I don't attend regularly. Haven't in years, but my parents do. Or did. Thomas Monroe's authority extended comfortably into that space. Committees, donations, the quiet kind of influence that never looks like power until it's gone. On Wednesday, a woman named Patricia Owens emailed me. Her signature line read, Elder Care Outreach Coordinator. Rachel, she wrote, your mother mentioned you might be going through a difficult season. I'd love to connect and offer support. Support, another word families use to soften intrusion. I forwarded the email to Dana. Her response came back immediately. They're trying to build a record of concern. Don't engage without counsel. I didn't reply. Thursday afternoon, Margaret called. They asked me if I felt pressured, she said. My jaw tightened. Who did? A church committee, she said. Your father sent them. And what did you say? I asked. I said my grandson-in-law hasn't visited in weeks, and my son only shows up when he wants something signed. I closed my eyes. She continued, calm as ever. Then I asked them why no one questioned his judgment when he changed my will without explanation. Silence. Even through the phone. Good, I said finally. Friday morning, Monroe Industrial Supply's quarterly numbers leaked, not publicly, internally. Enough to rattle confidence. 2 vendors suspended negotiations, pending clarification on leadership stability. The bank scheduled another review. Thomas called me again. I answered this time. You've made your point, he said. His voice was hoarse. This has gone far enough. I looked out at the river from my office window. Barges moving slowly, purposefully. Far enough for who? I asked. For all of us, he snapped. This is hurting people. I thought of Lauren's demotion, of my grandmother being treated like a liability, of 8 years of unpaid labor. This is correcting things, I said. Pain isn't always injustice. You think you're teaching a lesson, he said. No, I replied. I'm exiting a pattern. He exhaled sharply. If you walk away now, we can fix this. Fix. Meaning return to silence. No, I said. He hung up. That evening, Daniel texted me again. We need to postpone the wedding. I stared at the words longer than I expected. I replied with one sentence. I hope you're okay. He didn't respond. Saturday morning, Lauren showed up again. This time, I let her in. She sat on my couch, shoulders slumped, eyes red but dry. Something had burned through already. He's leaving, she said. I didn't ask who. He says he doesn't know who I am when I hide things, she continued. He says my parents scare him. I sat across from her, hands folded loosely. What do you want me to say? I asked. She looked up at me. Tell me how you do it. Do what? Stand there, she said, gesturing vaguely. And not beg. I considered her carefully. I stopped asking for permission, I said. That's all. She swallowed. Dad says you're destroying everything. I'm dismantling what shouldn't have been built that way, I said. She shook her head. You always talk like this is a system. Because it is, I replied. Families are systems. So are businesses. When one person controls everything, collapse is inevitable. She sat quietly for a long time. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. I don't know who I am without them, she said. I met her eyes. You'll find out. She left without hugging me. That night, I lay awake. Not from anxiety, but from awareness. Every line had been crossed. Every illusion stripped away. On Sunday morning, Dana called. We need to talk, she said. Your father filed a motion. I sat up. For what? Emergency guardianship, she said. Over your grandmother. The words landed heavy and cold. He's claiming undue influence, she continued. By you. I closed my eyes. There it was. The final escalation. When control fails, credibility is attacked. I took a breath. Okay, I said. What's the timeline? Hearing's been set, Dana replied. Tuesday morning, 2 days. I swung my legs off the bed and stood, feeling the floor solid beneath my feet. Then we're ready, I said. Because the thing Thomas Monroe still didn't understand was this. I'd already survived. being erased. Being accused was just paperwork, and I had brought more than enough of that. Courtrooms always smell faintly of old paper and recycled air. I noticed that first, standing just outside Probate Courtroom B at 8:32 a.m., my coat folded over my arm, my bag resting against my leg. Margaret Monroe arrived 10 minutes later. She wasn't in a wheelchair. She wasn't supported by anyone. She walked in on her own, chin lifted, eyes alert. Her hair was neatly brushed, lipstick applied with the same precision she'd used when she balanced household ledgers by hand. Thomas hadn't expected that. I saw it on his face the moment he turned and spotted her. He was already seated at the petitioner's table with his attorney, Mark Ellison, a man in his early 50s who wore impatience like cologne. Evelyn sat behind them, hands clasped, mouth drawn tight. Lauren wasn't there. Not this time. Dana Whitaker stood beside me. She gave me a brief nod. "Remember," she said quietly, "we let them speak first." I nodded. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Samuel Ortega took the bench, mid-60s, calm. Known for disliking theatrics and punishing people who wasted court time with family drama disguised as legal urgency. "This is the matter of emergency guardianship petition regarding Margaret Monroe," he said, scanning the file. "Petitioner, Thomas Monroe." Thomas stood. He looked smaller than he had in my parents' dining room. Less certain. His suit was pressed, but his shoulders were tight, his jaw clenched, like he was already bracing for resistance. "Your Honor," Mark Ellison began, "we are here out of deep concern for Mrs. Monroe's cognitive well-being. Recent actions suggest she may be under undue influence from her granddaughter, Rachel Monroe, leading to decisions that put her assets and safety at risk." Undue influence. There it was. The phrase people use when they don't like losing access. Ellison continued. "Mrs. Monroe recently reversed estate planning decisions and severed communication with her son. We believe this represents a sudden and troubling shift." Judge Ortega looked up. "Mrs. Monroe, are you present?" Margaret raised her hand slightly. "I am." "Do you understand why we're here today?" the judge asked. "Yes," she said, "because my son doesn't like being told no." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Thomas shifted. Ellison pressed on. "Mrs. Monroe, have you felt pressured by your granddaughter to change your estate plan?" Margaret turned her head slowly. She looked directly at her son. "I felt pressured by you," she said. "For months." Silence. Ellison tried again. "Are you aware of the financial complexity of your holdings?" Margaret smiled faintly. "I built them." That was when Judge Ortega leaned forward. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, "your response." Dana stood. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "this petition is not about concern. It's about control." She submitted the documents, independent medical evaluations, statements from Margaret's primary care physician, cognitive assessments, all current, all clear. "Mrs. Monroe is fully competent," Dana continued. "What has changed is her willingness to comply with decisions made without her informed consent." Judge Ortega reviewed the papers carefully. "Mr. Monroe," he said, "did you seek an independent medical evaluation before filing this petition?" Thomas hesitated. "I know my mother." "That's not what I asked," the judge replied. "No," Thomas said quietly. Judge Ortega nodded once. "That's noted." Dana wasn't finished. "Your Honor," she said, "we'd also like to address motive." She introduced the timeline, the revised will, the lack of independent counsel, the attempt to bypass Margaret's expressed wishes, the HR email, the bank review, the sudden urgency. "This petition was filed 2 days after the estate revision was voided," Dana said. "It's retaliatory." Ellison stood abruptly. "Objection." "Overruled," Judge Ortega said. "Continue." Margaret was invited to speak again. She didn't hesitate. "My son believes love means access," she said. "I taught him better. He chose differently." Thomas opened his mouth, closed it. The judge removed his glasses and set them down. "Emergency guardianship is an extraordinary measure," he said. "It is not a tool for family disputes or financial dissatisfaction." He looked directly at Thomas. "This petition is denied." The gavel came down. Thomas exhaled sharply. Not relief, something closer to collapse. Judge Ortega continued. "Furthermore, I find this filing to be without sufficient basis. I am ordering court costs to be paid by the petitioner." He paused. And I strongly suggest all parties refrain from further attempts to circumvent Mrs. Monroe's autonomy. The hearing ended. No shouting, no scenes, just a door closing. Outside the courtroom, Thomas approached us. "Mother," he said, voice strained. "This isn't over." Margaret looked at him with something like sadness. "It is for me." He turned to me. "You've turned her against us." I met his eyes calmly. "You did that when you treated her like an asset." Dana stepped forward. "Mr. Monroe, any further contact regarding legal matters should go through counsel." He laughed bitterly. "Of course." He walked away without looking back. Margaret squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For not speaking for me," she replied. "You let me speak." That afternoon, the bank called again, this time to inform Thomas Monroe that his credit line was under review pending governance changes. That evening, Lauren texted. "He tried to take control of Grandma." I didn't know it would go that far. I typed one response. "Now you do." I didn't send anything else. I went home, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window as the sun dipped behind the buildings. I wasn't triumphant. I was clear. There's a difference between winning and being done. Thomas Monroe had used every lever he had, and now there were none left to pull. Silence is uncomfortable for people who survive on reaction. After the hearing, everything went quiet. No calls from my father, no messages from my mother, no last-minute emergencies dressed up as concern, just absence. At first, it felt unnatural, like walking into a room where a machine had finally been turned off and your ears hadn't adjusted yet. Then it felt like relief. The consequences didn't arrive with drama. They arrived with memos. On Monday morning, Monroe Industrial Supplies Board announced an external governance review. No press release, no explanation. Just a calendar invite that quietly removed my father from 3 standing meetings. By Tuesday, 2 long-term vendors requested amended payment terms. By Wednesday, the bank formally reduced the company's credit line. None of it was my doing directly. That's the thing people misunderstand about revenge that's controlled. You don't have to swing the axe. You just step out of the way and let gravity do the rest. At work, my days filled quickly. The restructuring project I'd been assigned escalated faster than expected. Leadership resistance, inflated reporting, a familiar pattern. I walked into those rooms with the calm of someone who had already seen how this story ends. Melissa Grant pulled me aside after one session. "You've done this before," she said. "Yes," I replied. "With family," she added, not as a question. I didn't deny it. She nodded. "It shows." Thursday evening, Daniel Foster emailed me. Not Lauren. Him. Subject line: "Thank you." He wrote 3 short paragraphs. He thanked me for being honest. He said postponing the wedding had been difficult, but necessary. He said he was starting to understand how much pressure Lauren had been under and how much she'd learned to normalize it. He ended with one line: "I hope you're building something better." I closed the email and didn't reply. Some closures don't need acknowledgement. That weekend, Margaret and I took a walk in the park near her apartment. Slow, deliberate. She leaned on her cane but refused my arm. "Your father called," she said casually, like she was mentioning the weather. "And?" I asked. "He wanted to talk about reconciliation," she said. "On his terms." I smiled faintly. "Of course." I told him I'm not negotiating my autonomy, she said. "At my age, I don't have time for performances." I stopped walking and looked at her. "You're doing better than most people half your age," I said. She waved me off. "I learned from watching you." That landed deeper than she knew. Monday morning, HR from Monroe Industrial Supply reached out again. Not Karen Ellis this time. A new contact. Interim director. They wanted to confirm that all consulting matters were fully resolved and that no further claims existed. I forwarded the message to Dana. Her reply came back a few minutes later. "Confirm resolution. Keep boundaries clean." I did. An hour later, my father emailed me directly, for the first time since the hearing. No subject line, just text. "You got what you wanted. Are you satisfied?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed one sentence. This was never about satisfaction. It was about stopping. I didn't add anything else. I didn't need to. That night, Lauren called. Her voice sounded different, less sharp, less armored. "I moved out," she said. I sat down slowly. "Where?" "A sublet near campus," she said. "Just for a while. "And Daniel?" I asked. She exhaled. "We're figuring it out." A pause. "I didn't know how much Dad decided for me," she said, until he stopped. "I listened. I don't expect forgiveness," she added. "I just didn't want you to hear it from Mom." "I appreciate that," I said. We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. Some conversations are bridges. Others are acknowledgments that the river exists. After the call, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, city glowing faintly through the window. If you're listening to this, and you've ever wondered whether silence can be louder than confrontation, let me tell you this: it can. If this chapter resonates, take a moment. Like the story. Subscribe if you want to hear how it ends. And if you've ever watched consequences unfold slowly, exactly where they belong, leave a comment. Not for me, for yourself. Because what came next wasn't public. It was private. And it was final. By the end of that week, Thomas Monroe resigned from the company he'd built. Officially, it was for health reasons. Unofficially, it was because the rooms had stopped bending around him. No farewell dinner, no speeches, just a vacancy. Evelyn stopped attending church. Or maybe she still went and just stopped being visible. I never asked. Margaret updated her estate plan with an attorney of her choosing. Independent, clear, balanced. My name appeared again. Not because I demanded it, because it made sense. I didn't celebrate. I reorganized my bookshelf, donated old clothes, bought a new chair for the window. Small things, intentional things. One evening, as I watered the plant I'd nearly killed twice before learning its rhythm, I realized something quietly important. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for validation. Not for the family I thought I had. I had already stepped into the part of my life that didn't require permission. Freedom doesn't arrive as a feeling. It arrives as logistics. The first cost showed up in my calendar. Thanksgiving. For the first time in my life, there was no invitation, no group text, no carefully timed phone call asking what I was bringing. At first, I waited for it, without admitting that I was waiting. Then I stopped. I booked a flight instead, not to visit friends, not to make a statement. I flew to Portland on a Tuesday morning and checked into a small hotel near the river. No agenda, no family obligations, just space. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke early out of habit, made coffee in the hotel room, watched fog lift off the water. I didn't feel sad. I felt unused to the quiet. That was the cost. When you leave a system built on constant tension, your body doesn't immediately trust the absence of it. My phone buzzed once around noon. A text from Lauren. "Happy Thanksgiving." I typed back. "You too." Nothing else. We were learning a new language. One with fewer words. Back home, work accelerated. The restructuring project went into execution phase. Layoffs, leadership changes, hard conversations, necessary ones. I handled them without flinching, because I'd already practiced telling people the truth when they didn't want it. One afternoon, Melissa Grant stopped by my office. "You ever think about joining the board?" she asked. I looked up. "Which board?" She smiled. "Ours." I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat with the question. Board seats come with visibility, with permanence, with expectations. I thought of my grandmother balancing ledgers at her kitchen table, of my father demanding control, of the way power had always been framed as something taken, not shared. The next morning, I said yes. The second cost showed up in my relationships, not the obvious ones, the quiet ones. Friends who had known me for years started asking questions that felt like assessments. "You seem different. Are you okay? Do you ever talk to your family anymore?" I learned to answer simply, "I'm okay." I talk to who I choose. Some people drifted. They were more comfortable with the version of me that accommodated discomfort. I let them go. Freedom requires editing. In early December, Dana called. "Everything's finalized," she said. "No pending motions, no filings, no loose ends." I leaned back in my chair. "So that's it?" "That's it," she confirmed. "Thank you," I said. She paused. "You handled this cleanly." I smiled. "I learned from the best." She laughed softly. "You learned from surviving." The third cost arrived quietly, almost politely. Guilt. Not about the money. Not about the company. About my mother. Evelyn Monroe had spent her life adapting to Thomas's gravity. Orbiting. Softening edges. Making excuses. I thought of her alone in the house, the one she'd insisted was forever. I didn't call her. That was the boundary. But I acknowledged the cost, honestly. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop understanding other people's pain. It means you stop letting it define your choices. 2 weeks before Christmas, Margaret invited me over. She had decorations out. Subtle ones. A small tree, white lights. "I'm not hosting," she said immediately. "Just decorating." I helped her hang ornaments. The quiet kind of intimacy that doesn't ask anything of you. At one point, she looked at me carefully. "Do you feel free?" she asked. I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "But not the way people think." She nodded. "Freedom isn't relief. It's responsibility." Exactly. Christmas morning, I woke up in my own apartment, made eggs, read a chapter of a book, took a walk. My phone buzzed once from my father. "Merry Christmas." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I archived it, not out of spite, out of clarity. That afternoon, I received an email from the board confirming my appointment. Official. Permanent. I forwarded it to no one. That night, I sat by the window in my new chair and watched snow start to fall. I thought about the person I'd been taught to be. The daughter who didn't need anything. The sister who stayed quiet. The professional who worked twice as hard to be half as visible. I wasn't angry at her. I was grateful. She'd carried me far enough to choose differently. Freedom had cost me a family structure that no longer fit. It had cost me familiarity. It had cost me the illusion that fairness arrives without resistance. But it gave me something in return. Agency. Not borrowed, not conditional. Mine. The thing about choosing yourself is that the world doesn't applaud. It just adjusts. January came in clean and sharp. Cold mornings. Clear edges. I walked into the new year without a sense of restart, more like continuation. The noise was gone. The structure remained. On my second week as a board member, I learned what visibility really costs. The first board meeting wasn't ceremonial. No welcome speech, no introductions beyond names and titles. We sat around a long table, documents already open, coffee already cooling. Halfway through, a man named Victor Hale, one of the founding partners, leaned back and said, "We should consider family optics on this restructuring. Public perception matters." I looked at him. "Perception follows behavior," I said, not the other way around. The room went still. Melissa Grant glanced at me, then at Victor. "She's right," she said. "We're not in the business of preserving appearances. We're in the business of fixing systems." Victor nodded once. Not agreement. Acceptance. That was when I understood something important. I hadn't just left one system. I'd entered another. And this one rewarded clarity instead of compliance. A few days later, Lauren emailed me. Not a text, an email. Subject line, "Just letting you know." She wrote that she'd accepted a position at a nonprofit outside the family's industry. Operations coordinator. Lower pay, fewer perks, more autonomy. She wrote, "I don't know if this will last, but I needed to try something that wasn't chosen for me." I read it twice. Then I replied, "I'm glad you chose something." No advice, no warning. No, "I told you so." She didn't need a guide. She needed space. Margaret invited me to lunch the following Sunday. Her apartment smelled like soup and clean linen. She moved slower now, but with intention. We ate at her small table by the window. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her tea, "about legacy." I waited. "People assume it's about what you leave behind," she continued. "But I think it's about what you stop carrying." I smiled. "You're ahead of most people." She reached across the table and tapped my wrist lightly. "So are you." That afternoon, I walked home instead of driving. The air was cold enough to sting, but not unbearable. As I passed storefronts and offices, I noticed something I hadn't before. No one knew who I was related to. No one expected anything from me beyond what I did next. That anonymity felt earned. A week later, my mother called. I let it ring. Then, after the third ring, I answered. "Rachel," Evelyn said. Her voice was quieter, less managed. "I won't take much of your time." "You have it," I said. She hesitated. "I wanted to tell you I'm staying with my sister for a while." I closed my eyes. "I think," she continued, "I forgot what it was like to make decisions without permission." I didn't respond immediately. "That's not something I can help you with," I said finally. but I hope you figure it out." "I know," she said. "I just wanted you to hear it from me." "I heard you," I replied. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief or sadness. I felt completion. At work, my days were full but contained. Meetings had agendas, decisions had follow-through. Disagreements didn't require emotional decoding. One afternoon, Melissa stopped by my office again. "You've changed the way some people here think," she said. "About what?" I asked. "About authority," she replied. "You don't chase it. You don't defend it. You just use it." I thought about my father sitting at the head of the table. The way power had been something to perform. "This is easier," I said. She smiled. Exactly. That weekend, I reorganized my apartment, not out of restlessness, out of alignment. I moved the desk closer to the window, gave away books I'd kept out of obligation, threw out old files that no longer served a purpose. When I found the folder labeled Monroe Advisory Work, I paused. Then I shredded it, not because it wasn't true, because I didn't need proof anymore. On Sunday evening, I sat on the couch with a blanket and realized something quietly astonishing. I hadn't thought about revenge in weeks, not even abstractly. Revenge requires attention. I had moved on to maintenance. That's what real freedom looks like. Not dramatic exits, not final speeches, just the steady act of building a life that doesn't require defense. With no confrontation left unresolved, no apology pending, no role waiting to be filled, only the quiet understanding that I had become someone my old life could no longer contain. And that was enough. The final chapter wasn't about closure. It was about continuation and choosing it every day without needing to explain why. The last thing I learned was this: endings don't announce themselves either. They happen quietly, on ordinary mornings, when you realize you're no longer bracing for impact. It was a Wednesday in late February. Gray outside, not dramatic. I woke up before my alarm, made coffee, and stood by the window while the city warmed into itself. No messages waiting, no deadlines screaming for attention, just a full day ahead of me that belonged to me. That was how I knew it was over. Not because my father apologized. He didn't. Not because my family reunited around a table and healed. We didn't. But because my body no longer reacted to the absence of them. At work, the board finalized the restructuring I'd helped design. The vote was unanimous. When the chair thanked me, it was brief and professional. No backstory, no acknowledgement of where I'd learned to dismantle power without destroying everything in the process. That was fine. I didn't need the credit to be personal anymore. During lunch, I walked to a small park a few blocks away and sat on a cold bench with my coat zipped up to my chin. I watched people pass. Couples, solo walkers, someone on the phone arguing softly about groceries. Ordinary lives. Ordinary conflicts. I realized I wasn't angry at my family anymore. Anger had done its job. It had woken me up. It had given me clarity when clarity was expensive. Now it had nothing left to do. That afternoon, I received a short email from Lauren. Subject line: update. She wrote that she'd signed a lease on a small apartment of her own. 1 bedroom. No parking space. Close to work. She wrote that it felt strange and terrifying and right all at once. She ended with one sentence. "I think I finally understand why you left first." I read it once. Then I closed my laptop. Some understanding arrives late. It still counts. That evening, Margaret came over for dinner. I cooked. She supervised, from the chair near the counter, offering commentary that felt less like advice and more like tradition. "You always were patient," she said at one point. I smiled. "I learned it from watching you. Wait for people to become who they said they were." She chuckled. "And did they?" "Some of them," I said. After we ate, she sat quietly for a moment, then said, "Your father won't change." "I know," I replied. "And your mother may," she added. "But not in ways you can fix." "I know that too." She reached for my hand. "You chose the hardest option. You chose yourself without burning the house down." I thought about that. "I let the house stand," I said. "I just stopped living in it." She nodded. Exactly. When she left, the apartment felt calm. Not empty. Calm. I cleaned up slowly, put dishes away, wiped the counter. Ordinary acts that felt almost ceremonial now that no one was watching or judging or expecting anything from me. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I hope you're well. That's all. I replied with the truth. I am. Nothing else. I didn't need to explain how long it had taken to earn that sentence. Weeks passed. Then months. My father's name came up once in conversation at work, attached to an article about a regional supplier restructuring after leadership turnover. No one looked at me. No one made the connection. That anonymity felt like success. My mother sent a card on my birthday. No apology. Just a note saying she hoped I was happy. I placed it in a drawer and went on with my day. Margaret's health slowed, but her mind stayed sharp. We developed a routine: weekly lunch, short walks, conversations that didn't need to resolve anything to be meaningful. One afternoon, she said something I didn't expect. "I'm glad you didn't stay," she said. I looked at her. "Stay where?" "In the version of yourself they needed," she replied. "It would have cost you everything." That night, I lay in bed and thought about the girl I used to be. The one who sat quietly at the edge of tables. The one who translated silence into obligation. The one who believed competence would eventually be rewarded with belonging. She hadn't been wrong. She'd just misunderstood the terms. Belonging, I learned, isn't something you earn by shrinking. It's something you protect by leaving. If you've listened this far, thank you, truly. And if this story has stayed with you, take a second, like it, subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Leave a comment if you've ever chosen distance over damage, even when it cost you a family version you were told to want. Not for the algorithm. For the person who's still sitting at the wrong table, wondering if standing up will ruin everything. It won't. It will just change the room. I still live alone. I still work too much sometimes. I still notice details other people miss. I'm not healed in the way movies promise. I'm healed in the way real life allows. I wake up without dread. I make decisions without rehearsing them for approval. I measure my worth by what I build, not by who claims me. My family taught me many things, most of them by accident. The last lesson was the most important one, that the quietest person in the room isn't weak. They're often the one paying attention. And when they finally leave, the system feels it long after the door closes. That's the end of my story, not because everything is perfect, but because it's mine, and that's enough.